The views and opinions expressed by the participants of this show are those of the individuals who express them, and are not necessarily associated with the guests or sponsors of the show. Listener discretion is recommended. You're listening to Evangelion and Good Friends, a production of AvaMonkey, covering the many facets of Evangelion and its surrounding fandom. In this episode, we're talking with Claire Littley, who provided vocals for Evangelion's ending theme, Fly Me to the Moon. Enjoy the show. So, Claire, thank you for taking the time to talk to me today. I'm really excited to kind of hear about some of your experiences with this show and recording Fly Me to the Moon.
Hi, it's lovely to be here. Thank you for asking me.
As Evangelion fans, we know you for singing the lyrics to Fly Me to the Moon. But in your daily personal life, if you were to meet someone like on a date or at a party or even in like a job interview, I would wager that's probably something that doesn't come up.
It's interesting. It's something that actually I rarely talked about for a very long time because it felt like it was almost part of another life in a way when I'd stopped doing music. So yeah, it didn't come up often. I think over the last, it's a couple of decades, isn't it now?
Yeah, it's been a bit.
Yeah. So there've been a stream of regular emails actually from Eva fans that have, I think, at the start of the internet, because if you think when Evangelion came out there was no internet even. I think it was very early beginnings, and as the internet began to sort of proliferate our lives, I started to get the odd message here and there, and people would find me and say, "Are you the singer of Fly Me to the Moon?" And then that kind of ramped up. So that's kind of been a constant, really, but not something that I talked about hugely. It would come up now and then, but it wasn't something that I sort of, made a thing of because I'd stopped doing music.
Yeah, I would like to kind of get to know you a little bit more. So, like, if you were to meet somebody in your day-to-day life, how would you, like, if someone says, "Hey, Claire, tell me about yourself," what would you want them to kind of know about you?
Oh, that's a good question. I guess now I would... So I think as human beings, we're never defined by any one thing, are we? That we're sort of multifaceted, and the music is a massive part of my life again now. In the since last September, that's when I actually started writing again. The other passion of mine is climbing, and I really enjoy that. Don't get me started talking about either of them because I won't stop. And I guess design has been a big part of my life as well. So these are all things that are my passions, things that I enjoy. So they're the kind of things that I guess would help other people have an idea of what I'm about.
So you went to school for design and visual arts rather than music, isn't that right?
Yeah, so I guess design was my first love, and I went to to art school, and I did a graphic design actually, and yeah, I trained as a designer, and that's kind of how I make my living. That's how I've made my living over the years, and music was something that came later.
Having kind of scanned over, your career as a designer, it seems like it's been, pretty fruitful and diverse. And I did a little bit of digging, and I noticed like one thing that kind of jumped out at me was way back in the day, you did a website for the video release of The Sixth Sense, with Bruce Willis and Haley Joel Osment.
Gosh.
That was not a small movie. That movie made, like, in theaters, about $672 million, which, if you adjust for inflation, is it's over $1 billion. So,
fantastic movie as well, wasn't it? The twist at the end that we all went, "Oh my God!" It was such a great movie. Yeah, I did work on that. That was actually one of the earlier design jobs that I'd had. I joined a company, and that was a project that they'd landed, and yeah, that was at that point in time. God, you've taken me back a long way. At that point in time, I was literally just getting back into design, having sort of left design, and I'd been doing music for however many years, for various different reasons. Was back doing design, and yeah, that was a great project actually. A couple of years after Eva.
What do you love about design?
I guess, one of the things that I've brought to music this time round, and this might be, this is going back to the Abbey Road days actually, when I sort of was working with those guys there. One of the things that I enjoy about both, there are many parallels I think with design and music and art, and transferable kind of aspects of both. With design, with the visual arts, you're wanting to interact with your audience, the viewer, and evoke an emotion or a feeling in the same way you do with music. I think the thing with music is it's so much more immediate, so they can both be quite powerful and influential in our lives. And in the same way with design, I guess, you have a palette of colours that give, they evoke a mood and a response from the viewer. You have a palette of sounds that evoke feelings as well in a different way. So, yeah, I think there are so many parallels with both mediums. And I find that really interesting. I think one of the things that I felt all those years back, because I wasn't from a musical background, and then I sort of found myself at Abbey Road. I can tell you a bit more about that story later. I'm sure you've got some questions about that. But, with some amazing musicians, and there was a little bit of a feeling of imposter syndrome that I had because I'd not been trained as a musician. And just felt my way through the music that I did, which is what I'm doing now. And because I was so young, I felt as if, I should be able to do this, and I should know that, and I should. And actually, with all of the years of design, I kind of, having worked with, junior designers and done some mentoring, that actually if someone has an eye and a talent, you can learn the software and you can learn the frameworks around the various different things that you might want to do with design, in the same way you can with music. You just have to have that dedication and time to sit down and learn the software or learn that thing. So yeah, with music now, I guess I feel like actually I may not have any kind of classical training or theory, understanding the theory of music, but I can sit and I know that actually if it feels, it's about feeling. They're both about feelings, I guess, to come around to your original question. And empathising with an audience and being able to express whatever it is you're trying to convey through, that visual art or, the music that you're creating.
Yeah, I remember back in my art days in school, they always impressed on us the idea that we were visual art students, but it was important for us to also understand, how to write, potentially how to compose music, because, art is not just about one particular medium. It's about communicating, thoughts and feelings and ideas through, various mediums. It's good to be ambidextrous in terms of being able to express things through design, through visual art, as well as through music.
Yeah, and I think if you've had the opportunity to have training in any of these things, it's it's a privilege. Not everyone has access to stuff like that, but if you haven't, then we all have our own way. We all find our own way through life, right? So there may be, when you're at college or when you're at school, it's like, well, if you do this and you do A, B, and C, and then you end up at D, and actually life's not like that. Life can take you off at completely different angles that you hadn't expected or wanted. Life is random, so you find your own way with things, and you find your own way of doing things sometimes, and the tried and trusted methods are often, valid, but there's always other ways, and, everything in its time. I'm a perfect example of that, I guess. Sitting talking to you now, all of these years later, everything in its time, isn't it?
Yeah, this is probably a good place to kind of switch over or kind of move on to talking about the topic of the hour, which is your experience with Fly Me to the Moon. And for people that aren't familiar with the song's history, I wanted to kind of go over that just a little bit. Fly Me to the Moon was written by Bart Howard in 1954 and was originally titled In Other Words. American actress, comedian, and singer Kay Ballard recorded the song the same year, and the song was covered by numerous singers and artists over the next 10 years and became informally known as Fly Me to the Moon. And in 1963, singer Peggy Lee convinced Bart Howard to officially change the song's name. The next year, in 1964, Frank Sinatra recorded the song for his album It Might Be Swing. It was arranged by Quincy Jones, who changed the song's timing from 3/4 to 4/4. By the time Sinatra had recorded the song, more than 100 versions had been recorded, and by the time it was recorded for Neon Genesis Evangelion, more than 300 recordings had been made. Bart Howard passed away in February of 2004 at the age of 88. Of all the recordings, I think it's safe to say that two of the most iconic recordings would have to be Sinatra's in 1964 and yours in 1995.
Wow, that's amazing. That's really, really amazing information. I didn't know half of what you just told us then. It's incredible.
Yeah, there's a longer and richer history of this song. It's all detailed in full on Wikipedia, but those are like the Cliff's Note, because it's one of these songs that has been recorded so many. Like Evangelion itself has dozens of versions of this song. Like there's multiple that have that are derived from your recording itself. So let's go back in time. Let's go back to the year of 1994. 1 year before Evangelion, and probably prior to your recording of the song. So you're 25 years old, and tell us about your life at the time, before Evangelion intersected your life.
So 25, only a few years ago then, Aaron.
Yes.
Okay, so I guess starting with Abbey Road, I think I just mentioned, I wasn't from a musical background. My family are not musical, and it was something that at uni just kind of fell into. But I'd been doing some music. I'd taken a year out of my graphic design degree, which was a 4-year sandwich, so it was a placement year. And I'd sort of started, I had a demo cassette back in the days when we had cassettes, and I had a few songs on a demo, and I was kind of getting, what can I do with this? You never know. People seem to like my voice, and I seem to have an ability to, improvise, and I'd started getting some sessions. So I'd go to, I'd turn up at the studio and say hello, and I've got a cassette, can I leave it? And so little projects were coming up here and there. Anyway, I'd moved to London. I was living in Kilburn, which is walking distance from St John's Wood, which is where Abbey Road is. And I'd left a cassette on the reception desk and just said, I'm a singer, and if you need someone to do some sessions or whatever. So I'd left the cassette on the desk, and Darren Godwin, who is my co-writing partner of the new songs that I'm working on now, was working at Abbey Road at the time, and he'd picked up the cassette from the reception desk and gave me a call and said, I had listened to your cassette, I really like your voice, do you want to come and have a chat and we could talk about maybe doing some work together? So I went in. Basically, I ended up working with the guys there on a bunch of original songs. We had stuff that we were writing together. There was another guy called Giles Holland, who I actually saw on Friday, so a few days ago for the first time. And we're actually doing some writing as well, so, you know, a little bit of a collaboration going on at the moment. And we would go into the various different studios, mostly in the evenings when they were, you know, we would use the downtime, so no one had booked out a studio, so we would go in and, you know, Giles would sit at the piano and, you know, and then we did some other stuff with a bit of a live band, and we did a record. So we used all of the different studios at different times, so I was hanging out there with those guys and working on my other projects as well that were kind of going on. In terms of being asked about Fly Me to the Moon, I'd met a girl called Aki who was recording at the studios, and she was a Japanese singer, and she had a band, a pop band, and we'd sort of had a chat, and it's all a little bit vague, but she basically said, do you know anyone that sings, you know, we're looking for a British jazz singer for a song that we're recording. Do you sing jazz? And I said, well, it's kind of, a lot of the stuff I do is very soulful, jazzy vibes, but what's the song? And I didn't actually know Fly Me to the Moon, which is, I mean, that sounds ridiculous because it's such a well-known jazz standard, but it wasn't, if you think, I wasn't sort of, you know, the guys that I worked with, their knowledge of music was encyclopedic, and I didn't have a lot of knowledge, so it was unfamiliar. And I sort of said, oh, actually, let me have it. She said, well, would you like to audition for it? And I said, yeah, sure, that sounds great. So for me, it was like, oh, that sounds like it would be quite interesting. Anyway, I went away and sort of learnt a version of the song, and they asked me if I would, you know, do the recording. I was actually looking through some files earlier, and I have a slip of paper that they'd given me that I have a scan of from years ago. I've still got it on a disc, and it basically is a slip of paper that says Toshiyuko Omori and Aki Omori, who are brother and sister, recording at Abbey Road Studios. You're welcome to come along and listen to the strings being recorded beforehand, and an amount for the session. So I was paid a session fee for the recording. So basically they had a 24-piece string orchestra, and I was invited. They said to me, if you want to come along and listen to that, and I absolutely love strings, so I was like, yeah, please, I'd love to be in the studio to hear that. That's amazing. So when I got there, and it was in Studio 2, I think it was Studio 2. It's one of the studios at Abbey Road that's iconic, and it's pretty huge. The engineer's booth is, you go up some stairs, and kind of the engineer's booth, there's a big pane of glass, and you can look down into the studio. So we were kind of up in the engineer's booth, and the string orchestra were kind of, you know, it was several hours of recording the strings. And it was beautiful. I mean, you know, the strings are so emotive, aren't they? It was incredible. And I mean, it would have just been a nice day out, really. If I hadn't sung, I would have just enjoyed being there. That's the truth. And then at the end of that, it was, okay, do you want, you know, it's time to do the vocals. No pressure. So I watched each of the kind of 24 string musicians they all kind of lined up and were given their envelope with their payment, and kind of everyone disappeared, and then there was this big empty room. It's interesting thinking about it now, because I can remember the feeling actually of standing there in this vast space, and they had it's very visual. It's like they had a mic, you know, kind of the suspended in front of me, and they put some acoustic boards, you know, kind of like screens, almost like a you know, vocal booth around me. And then it was just like, okay, go, you know. And I remember, you know, as I do with most as I did with sessions back then, and as I do now, I'll kind of try to run through the song and just really get a feeling for it. To immerse myself in the song and not be conscious of myself. Just the music and the vocal kind of then become sort of forefront, that in a way to kind of evoke that feeling. What am I feeling? What am I feeling from the music, and how can I express that through myself? And then we run through the song. I think we were there for probably about an hour, and they had a bunch of takes, and we listened through. And I think the key actually is a little bit too high for me. It's slightly less comfortable than I probably would have chosen, but it worked, and yeah, they were very happy with it. I remember that, and then the next thing, that they'd come back to me. I didn't have much contact with, I've had sort of, I've seen a couple of messages, had a couple of messages about, were you involved with this? And I wasn't. It wasn't like I was part of that crew. It was a sort of chance meeting, and I just happened to be there at the time.
It definitely sounds like a string of happenings or happenstance,
Yeah, absolutely. So it wasn't like, it was a few weeks. It was over the course of it must have been about a year. So, I was kind of in and out of the studios quite a lot. And it wasn't sort of a big deal, really. I think, if you know me, it's like, these are things and places, and they have an iconic status. But actually, I think what's important is always how we treat each other, I think. So how people are, and actually the people at the studios there in such an iconic place were probably Darren and Giles, two of the kindest, most humble guys that I've met when I was doing music. So it's about that stuff. That's the important stuff. I think for Abbey Road, it's world famous. But when you're there and you're with people, it just becomes part of the sort of ordinary everyday. So it's a weird one. It's like anything, isn't it? It becomes part of your life.
While you were there recording that day, in terms of like directing or producing it, was it Omori or
I think so. Yeah. So there was an engineer, and I there's stuff like that I don't remember so much, but
because it's been a bit.
I'm pretty sure Toshi was there, but it was almost like, because it was a session. If you imagine, I was going in to do a session, so it wasn't this big old here's Claire, the singer of Fly Me. It was like, oh yeah, Claire's the singer that's the British singer that's going to be doing the song. And then I think what happened was they'd taken it back to Japan, to King Records. And the next thing I was asked, oh, do you know what, we really want to release it as a CD mini disc. Do you remember the little Sony mini disc?
Yes, they don't skip.
Yeah, well, you've seen the thing, haven't you? The little thing with my photo on it. So
I recall that the big thing with those at the time was that they didn't skip.
Yeah, so they came back and said, oh, we want to release it as the song as a CD mini disc. Could you write a little bio and give us a photograph for it, and we'll pay you a little bit extra for that. The photograph that you've seen, the sort of cross process kind of, it's very it's where I've got very long hair. That was actually my friend Michelle. So I was doing some running, and I sort of helped out and did a bit of assisting with some photographers in the West End. And Michelle Jocelyn was a good friend of mine, and she was one of the photographers at that studio.
They just kind of gave you like the creative freedom to, do the photos of the person that you wanted to do them with.
Yeah, well, they just said to me, "Can you provide a photo for the for the cover?" And I said, "Yeah, hey Michelle, will you do the photo?" And she's like, "Yeah, cool." So that's how that happened.
This all sounds very, very casual. Like it's like they brought someone in to sing, and then they did the recording that day, and there wasn't a whole lot of like, this isn't a big, huge like production where like there's multiple days of recording and tons of feedback back and forth.
Well, yeah, there wasn't though, was there? Really, I guess it was the afternoon.
You didn't get a whole lot of notes. You kind of like, you guys did the recording and that was kind of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think because, so in some ways, I think because I didn't know the song inside out, so if I'd known, say, Frank Sinatra's version of it, it may have been that I tried to imitate that.
Yes, yes.
And I think one of the things that I did a lot was I used to go to a lot of jams in London. So I'd, like a jazz jam or, music jam. And you'd go in, guitarists would get up and they'd play and people would just improvise. And I used to love that because it was so sort of on the fly. You had to just make something up. And that was a brilliant way. I mean, that really helps with songwriting. You start with nothing, so you find a melody, and then the initial ideas and the initial melodies kind of then evolve, and then you put some backing vocals in. You put a guide vocal. But with "Fly Me to the Moon," I knew the melody more or less, and so, but I wasn't kind of limited to, oh yeah, I know that song, so without even meaning to, you kind of fall into that way of singing it. There were a couple of little sort of improvised bits in the, where I kind of go, only you, further into the song. But yeah, in context, I think you have to think about all of this really in context, because now we know how huge Evangelion became. It was unknown then. When they asked me to do it, they said, "Oh, it's for a manga anime," and no one knew what manga was. Manga wasn't prolific in the UK at all. Basically, this was just the very beginning of it, and it was very unknown. No one knew that Evangelion was going to be so huge. There was no internet, so it was years and years and years actually before I even knew that "Fly Me to the Moon" had been such a great success. And it was actually, I can remember sitting at my computer, and my girlfriend at the time had said to me, she was looking for my portfolio online, and she said, have a look at, she said, I've just typed in Claire Littley and all of this stuff's come up. And I was like, great. So I typed it and I was like, oh my God. And there was all of this stuff, "Fly Me to the Moon," Evangelion, and it was just Claire. It didn't say Claire Littley because on the CD they said, and I said just Claire is fine. So,
I was going to ask you, was that deliberate on their part, or was that like, Cher, Bono, was that how you preferred to like go by back then as your artist name?
Do you know what? I didn't even think about it too much.
That's just what they
I was
went
just
with.
like, yeah, just Claire, that's fine. And it wasn't like I was trying to be Cher or Prince or, one
It's just something they
one
did.
first name only. It wasn't like that sort of, oh yeah, I'm a star, I just go by my first name. I was just, yeah, Claire's fine, So yeah, so no one knew. So no one knew that it was me.
So you weren't immediately aware of the phenomenon that it had come.
No.
When did you say that realization had dawned upon you that, hey, this thing that I did such and such years ago has like become this big thing?
Oh, I guess it's only been recent years actually. Maybe the last.
How recently are we talking about?
Well, the last few.
The last few?
Yeah, few years, and
probably like since 2019-ish.
What are we
maybe
now? 21, maybe a little. Yeah, possibly. Why do you say that? Why do you say 2019? There's a
summer
reason you're saying that, isn't there? I can
potentially. June, I want to say June 2019 is when the show was put on Netflix.
Ah, yes, that was interesting. Yeah, and that was really interesting actually, because so I guess it was probably before that. I knew that it'd become. I think, it was actually quite painful at times, in all honesty, because I had realised that the song had been used on, multitude of compilations and various different media, and that was something that was never agreed.
Yeah, so you basically got your day rate, but you never got any like residuals or performance.
No, so I mean, at the time it was a small amount for the session. It's like, and then they'd paid a little bit extra for the use of the photograph, and I think to find out that it had been used on all of this other stuff, and obviously, because there was no, as I said, there's no internet, so there's no, there's no comms. The world wasn't as international then as it is now, even. To kind of realise that actually this has become this multi-billion-dollar enterprise, and actually it would have been fair of them to, just to be fair and come back and say, actually, we want to use the song on a bunch of different stuff. How do you feel about that? Because it would have been easy enough to find me at this point. Many, many years before, probably not.
So a lot of very complicated feelings that,
Yes.
to find out that like it's, humbling to see that your work has become part of such a humongous thing, but also kind of feeling like the whole thing has left you behind.
And there's that aspect. That's one thing, but I think on a completely different level and a more meaningful level, some of the messages, all of the messages, I would say 99% of the messages I get, and I'd started to get more of them, were always often about how important the song had been for that person in their life, and how it had helped them through a dark period, or there've been messages, some early ones that I can remember were, I was in hospital, I had to have an operation. My friend my friend played me your song and it made me cry and I felt so much better. And another guy, this is years ago, I split up with my girlfriend and I cried a lot and I listened to your song and it healed the heart of a 14-year-old. And then more recently, people have played the song at their wedding. It's been played at funerals for loved ones. It carries so much meaning, and that's, in my life, really, really valuable for me, especially with my own story that's kind of not really something I've spoken about, but it carries a lot of weight and meaning. So knowing that the song had become so huge, it was almost like, and I was saying this to a friend a couple of days ago, things in life that we are passionate about, our biggest passions, our biggest loves, whether that's the things we do or the people, are often the things that can bring us the most frustration and pain as well. So you have that equal balance of, desire and when things don't work, when you lose someone, it's an equal amount of pain on the imbalance. And every time, realising the song had been so important to people was actually, it made me quite sad. So the messages, as lovely as they were, every time I got one, I'm like, and I'm not doing music anymore. So it was quite poignant. And then, obviously, it's in the last few years, the whole thing with Eva's ramped up more and more.
Yeah, absolutely.
and the sort of the calling to do music has become more and more, there's an awareness of that more and more. So, and then here we are.
So I guess some of the other questions I have are probably mostly no, just because of that disconnect that you were never approached for like any other performances, or there are a couple other English songs that were recorded by another artist that you probably were not approached about either.
I wasn't, and it's I guess as well, as I said, I wasn't sort of part of that crew. I wasn't visible and I wasn't singing. I wasn't around. I'd kind of, I'd sort of hidden away in a sense. I was doing design, and I guess that was my sort of creative outlet, and I was working with that. But left music. I wasn't doing any music at all. It's no surprise, really. If I was still singing and doing music, maybe I would have been contacted. I don't know.
So in the event that you were, or do you have any desire, or would you consider, or enjoy, doing vocals for the franchise again if you were approached about it?
Yeah, of course. I think knowing how, so for me, the whole thing with music and songs, and the reason I'm doing music again now, is because I think that's for other people. I get it's a passion of mine. I love the creative process. I lose hours, sitting with at my screen and playing with a song, but ultimately whatever I'm doing is for other people. It's for other people to hear and to enjoy. That the feeling that you're creating in that piece is for someone else. So knowing the response I got on Reddit which is how we come to be talking today, when I'd posted that, would anyone be interested? And then suddenly I was like, whoa, okay, that's overwhelming. It was amazing.
People really, really care a lot about the franchise and the things that kind of compose it. So I'm not surprised at all that you got such a warm reception.
And yes, of course, I would if I felt that there was if that was something that I felt other people would enjoy, then I wouldn't say no to doing that.
There is another component to this. There is some contention and concern about the quality of the dubbing and audio of the Netflix release, partially because of the rights to the song, in like a global sense.
Yeah, I've seen some of that. Furious Eva fans.
Are you aware? That they actually removed the song from the show because of apparent licensing? I've
seen the post myself, and I had no awareness of any of this. I'd seen Evangelion on Netflix. And it wasn't until I read some of the posts that I'm like, because I didn't know where the song appeared. I'm like, was it at the end of the series or was it at the beginning?
Oh wow!
I knew exactly. So I knew that the song appeared in various different places.
So when you recorded, you didn't even know how it was going to be used in the show. You didn't know that it was going to be the ending theme for the show.
No. They basically said it's going to be used in the credits for a manga anime. So that was it. So whether that was going to be at the beginning or whether that was going to be at the end. And then, later I realised there were sort of multiple versions of that. So the original backing track, obviously, with the string orchestra, so any of those versions with the strings, that was recorded in London. And I guess I was the first singer to actually sing on that version with the strings, because I was right there. And then I'm assuming they took it back to Japan and they had some of the other singers then sing their versions with the strings, and they did various different mixes of it, as you know. But yeah, I did so little information. And then I think Aki had gone back to Japan, so that was kind of the end of it. It was very sort of brief,
kind of came and went
episode. Yeah
there is that those licensing issues and The last time, like because there are so many different versions and there's some other singers that have done it, but the last time the song was used in any like real direct capacity with Evangelion was the 2007 version by Hikaru Utada, who is a huge pop star over there, and that was used in the trailers for Evangelion 1.0, which is one of the newer movies. And as far as like soundtracks, they have included versions of "Fly Me to the Moon," but typically they are versions by Yoko Takahashi, who is again another big star, rather than the original version that you recorded for, or just using your vocals in general. One of the big questions people have that you might not be able to comment on, but there are a lot of people that really want to hear your version on things like Apple Music, Amazon Music, Spotify. Do you know anything at all about just the licensing for, your song, your version, or just the song in general, as to like how, it hasn't been used in some things?
Well, or
again, is there just that big disconnect?
No, I think one of the reasons, and I'm not 100% sure of this, but I did actually reach out to King Records a few years back around the usage of the song for all of these other different things. It kind of came down to, they had an opinion that it had been, the song, it was a buyout and there was no paperwork. And I sort of said, actually, well, it was an agreement around the use for the series and the CD mini disc, not all of the other stuff that it's been used on. And I think at the time it was just sort of left because I remember that was about 2017 because I was just moving here and I was going through a breakup and I was just like, okay, do you know what? Let's just leave it. And it was left. But I can only, reading between the lines, the fact that it hasn't ever been, it wasn't used on Netflix, I think they probably knew that if they'd done that, then, it was in dispute anyway, in a sense.
So you feel they wanted to move away from it then?
I think they probably knew that they hadn't, but it wasn't a buyout, and that wasn't the case. And I think what they then did was thought, well, we'd better not use it on these various other different things because then she has a claim. So I'm only guessing at that, really, but it kind of, I can't see any other reason for them not doing that. That if the licensing, when people say, oh, the licensing was too much, that's sort of some of the posts that I've read. They couldn't license it for Netflix because it would have cost too much. It's like, well, why? If they own the song, then why would that be the case? So the only reason I can think is because they actually knew that they probably should have been a little bit more fair with me.
Interesting.
But yeah, it's one of those things. It could have been a discussion that we'd had, but nothing came of it, and I just left it. And I just thought, you know what? I don't want to focus on the negative. I want to focus on the positive, and let's get on with my life, and and now doing music again. It's part of the past, really. It's in terms of that version of "Fly Me to the Moon" on Spotify. They've never put it on Spotify as far as I can tell, but
there are other versions,
but not my version, right?
Right.
Yeah, and
right.
I think the only reason I can only guess that the only reason they've not done that is because they know that they didn't actually own the rights to do that, and but I don't own those rights. It's not like I have those rights, but
right.
I think I don't know. It's very it's a little bit confusing, but I can say that I am starting to work on a new version of "Fly Me to the Moon" that I've not told anyone about. So you're the first person to know about that. Yeah, it's not. I kind of said, let's do a version that is different to, the Evangelion one, but I'd like to do a really, really beautiful version, a version that stands up with that version. It is such a beautiful song, and it is loved by so many. So we're going to be revisiting that and doing a version, a 2021 or 2022 version.
Very cool.
Yeah, it's quite exciting.
Yeah, we'll definitely sync back to music in a bit. I do want to take the opportunity to ask you the big question, which is, being as though there was that disconnect in terms of like, the show and its magnitude, but now knowing what Evangelion is, did you take the time to sit down and watch it?
I have, yes. I've watched the first series on Netflix,
So you watched the TV show. How about the end of Evangelion?
I've not watched that yet, no. I basically, I started watching, I have to say, probably like many, it's one of those things you can't actually sit and watch it and browse on your laptop with a cup of tea at the same. You have to sit and really concentrate, and then life has been so busy, so I've kind of dipped in, dipped out, dipped in, dipped. But I have watched it all. There's 26 episodes, isn't it? And there was a lot of stuff that I found a little bit confusing. And just like, what just happened? I don't know what's going on.
The movie helps with that a little bit.
I have found it's actually been quite scary actually at times, because some of the themes in Evangelion are so in parallel with some of my life, and without knowing that, and the Fly Me to the Moon song and Evangelion are kind of entwined in a way. And there were, I mean, the sort of deep, the character studies and the, psychological struggles that they go through. It's very existential. And I found the character studies really, really super interesting. I can see why the song was so meaningful. Anyone that's ever been outside of social norms and didn't fit in, and some of the outsiders, you can see how meaningful the series is, and why Fly Me to the Moon associated with that was so powerful.
The show can hit pretty hard at times. Are you aware of what the show's target audience started out as?
No, I'm not. No.
Middle schoolers.
Wow.
Yeah, it aired 6:30 on Wednesday evenings. It replaced in that time slot Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. The comic itself actually ran in Shonen Ace, which is basically for young boys, with things like Dragon Ball and such.
Right, yeah. You can see those references quite clearly. I guess, in context, historically, in its time, because it's slightly dated now in some respects. I mean, it's quite sexist in some ways. That probably stuff like that, some of the scenes or some, the women are quite objectified in Evangelion, and they're quite strong characters as well, but I don't think some of that stuff would probably be aired now. But then there's other stuff that is, I can kind of see what you're saying. So you've got the sort of younger audience aspects, but then much sort of deeper, more serious, deeper psychological issues that are addressed and looked at. It's super interesting. Yeah, it's a really interesting series.
It's an interesting, I guess, dichotomy in terms of yes, it definitely has, it's made by, basically, adult male otaku nerds. There's the male gaze is definitely present there, but it also, is one of those things that has, strong, realistic depictions of women. And that made, I think that's part of what made the show popular. It was primarily aimed at boys, but it also has had a very strong following, with males and females. It's very even in that, I think.
Yeah.
It's appealed to both. It's not strictly a boys show. I know plenty of female fans of the show, and they like a lot of the female characters. They appeal to them.
Yeah. I guess Asuka is completely kick-ass, isn't she? And and then you've got Misato, who, it's the sort of the character studies are really interesting because they're multi-dimensional, aren't they? So you learn to understand why Asuka's got such a huge brick wall up in front of her, and doesn't let anyone close, and Shinji's got all of his stuff going on, and I think the sort of parental familial dynamics are covered, and there's all of that psych stuff that I absolutely love, as you know. So I can see the appeal to both genders, or all genders. It's not binary, is it?
Do you have any like collectibles or mementos, either from the recording of the song or the show itself?
I did. I had a copy of the mini disc, and also Michelle, the photographer, had a copy of that, and that's about it. That is all I have. And that's kind of, oh gosh, I had it in a plastic kind of sleeve, and it's kind of fallen apart over the years. I've still got it. I actually can see it from here on my bookshelf. Kind of slipped in between some books, but it's not in the best state now. It's kind of been in a drawer, back of a drawer for a while.
Just one little floating reminder that's been rattling around in a drawer or on a shelf somewhere.
Yeah, apart from the messages, obviously, all of the messages.
Do you have a favorite character, or a character that you related to?
Yeah, I think someone asked me that on a message, and I would say I kind of have a soft spot for Shinji. I think he gets a hard rap.
He definitely does.
Yeah, and I think I do. I can relate. I think we can all relate to aspects of all of the characters in different ways. But there's stuff with him. He's kind of he's seen as a bit of a coward, isn't he? But I don't think he's trying to discover who he is, and he has a guilt complex, and he struggles with that. And I think that's actually a strength. He has an awareness about the ethics of what he's doing. And, it's painful for him, and he tries to deal with it. And actually, he's a young kid, right? So, I kind of feel like, give him a break.
I think if any of us were at that age, the fate of all humanity has been heaped on top of us. Like, I feel like pretty much anybody would just curl up into a ball and just fall apart.
And finally, in the final episode, he does, with all of his existential angst, he does find his way, doesn't he? And he, I think he says something like, he's who am I, and there's all of that going on. And he's like, I am who I am, I'm me, and he sort of sets himself free.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, that tells, and again, I wasn't aware of this. I actually saw that episode after I'd written Love Will Set You Free, which is the new song. The song is actually, it's about finding meaning. It's about finding your way to self-acceptance and loving the person that you are. And that love will set you free. And I actually, when I saw that final episode, I was like, wow, that's what the first song is about. And I wanted this to be the first song that we released.
But there's definitely some resonance there.
There's a lot of synchronicity. Yeah, there's a huge amount, and completely oblivious to all of that until I'd seen that sort of final episode. And I saw the final episode very recently. I was like, wow, that's shocking.
So it's been a long and long delayed journey for you.
It has, yeah. I think everything in its own time, and we all have our own paths and our own battles and our own choices to make. Yeah, it's kind of come around again now, and all of these kind of moments are quite meaningful. You kind of go, wow. There's actually the second pre-chorus in Love Will Set You Free. I wrote the lyrics to that deliberately as a nod to Fly Me to the Moon, and it's the part that's come fly with me, let's fly off to the stars.
Mm-hmm.
Because the Eva fans have been so amazing with me actually over the years. Every single one of those messages, and I've written this on a couple of posts, every single one of those messages that I get, I don't take it lightly. It's someone's actually taken, that's a person with their own life and their own stuff going on, and they've taken that time to send me that message, and that's really, really important and meaningful. And yeah, I really value all of that stuff hugely. That's actually been one of the things that's probably been part of feeling impelled to start doing music again. You know, the vibes and the good energy that I get from all of the Eva fans, it's incredible. And I value it so much, you know, truly.
Would you say that it was part of the motivation for returning to music?
Oh, it's many things. It's I think it's been incredible support and a constant reminder. You know, when people sort of say to you, you know, you have a talent, it's a waste, and it doesn't help you. You know, it's actually, you know, if you it's those words that oh, you should do. Actually, you can only do what you can do at that moment in time in your life, and you're the only one that can make that decision to do or not to do whatever that thing is. And I guess, you know, things sometimes come together. It's normally a bunch of different things that happen, isn't it? That it's never normally one thing that makes you, that's it, I'm leaving that job, you know, or that's it, I'm leaving that relationship, or oh my God, I'm going to go and travel around the world. You know, not that many of us are that spontaneous. There's normally a bunch of, you know, smaller, and it builds up, and then you go, all right, I've got to do it now. And I think with me, it was like that. There was a bunch of different things that sort of all combine. But the constant influence and the you know, the thing that's been constant all of these years has been Evangelion and the you know, the Eva people. That's always been there. You know, sometimes more present than others, but it's been a constant. Yeah, it's amazing, actually, isn't it? It's amazing.
Yeah. So I do want to talk to you about you know, your hiatus from, you know, music and, you know, your return to it. But I think first, might be just good to talk to you real quick about how exactly did you, you know, first, where did your aspirations for music, you know, originate? At what point did you decide I want to become a singer?
Oh gosh, well, it kind of just, that was another thing that sort of happened when I was, I'd gone to uni to study. I'd left home, and I'd actually gotten quite behind with my work, with my coursework. So I'd gone into the studio really early in the morning to try and catch up. And I can remember walking up the stairs. I've told this story before, actually, to a few friends, and I was walking up the stairs with my headphones on. I was singing away, you know, with my headphones, and someone sort of stopped me and said, "Was that you singing? Wow, you know, you have a really..." And I was like, "Oh, really? Thanks," you know. And she was a fourth. I was like first year fresher. She was a fourth year fashion student, and I think she was going out with a drummer. I got to know her anyway, and she was dating a drummer who was in the band Aswad. So she was, you know when you're kind of first year and this is a fourth year student, and you kind of put them on a pedestal a little bit. And she kind of said to me, you know, Karen Wheeler, do you remember the band Soul to Soul? They were huge in the UK. Basically, she was like, yeah, I know, you know, she knew this girl, and I really think you could have a good voice if you worked at it. And I was, at the time, I thought, actually, I do like singing. I wonder if I could. I might as well have a try, you know, give it a go. And yeah, I think there was like a you know, just a end of term type band thing. And I got together with a guitarist and another guy playing bongos. Out of time, if I remember. And we sang, we did Dock of the Bay, sitting in the morning sun. And we did a few songs. And it was just like, I don't know, it just felt really good and people liked it. And I just thought, why not give it a go? And I think I was probably quite ballsy when I was younger. And so I kind of then, I sort of got a little cassette and in a local studio in Preston, just singing over, a drum track. And then I took that to somewhere, I was like, hey, I'm wanting to learn about singing and, is there anything I can do? So I always approach things like that. I did that with design as well. I'd sort of say, is there anything I can do to help? And and very shortly I joined a little soul band in Preston doing backing vocals, which was brilliant because you learn so much about singing doing backing vocals because you have to do harmonies and. And then I'd sort of gone into Manchester and I was doing some backing vocals on some recordings. And things started to, and then I was like, I'm going to go down to London because there's an audition that I want to, So doing all of these things, I sort of put myself out there and I had a few more things on my cassette. And then, that led on to sort of more work and more demos to be able to play people, and it just sort of rolled from there really. That was how it started. I kind of think it was kind of quite fearless, I guess, at the time.
And that all, coalesced, and eventually that cassette ended up at at a reception desk or something at Abbey Road.
Well, that was a little bit later on. I think the stuff I had on my demos then would have been more advanced by that point. But yeah, pretty much I think, my motto was, and it's something I still say now, you never know.
Right.
And if you approach things like that, you never know. You sort of, if I give it a try. And I think that's sort of, I lost some of that at one point, or I lost that a lot. And I think climbing, we spoke about climbing. Climbing's amazing for that because you know you're going to fall, you're going to foul a million times if you want to get up the wall. And that's a big part of climbing, that you will foul, but you keep trying, and then eventually you get there and you go, whoa, I feel amazing. It's so good for that. So you have to try things, don't you? And
I saw one of your friends commented on I think it was a story on Instagram about climbing the moon, and like, oh, was this back during your singing days, and that there was a hiatus there from singing in the years following your again that intersection between your life and Evangelion. And I understand that there was some degree of personal loss. So if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about how you stepped away from music for a number of years, and how you kind of came back to music, and the album that you're working on.
Well, first of all, the message, that friend Viren, actually, we worked together on a design company, and it turned, he's really into the Comic-Con thing. And his wife was a big fan of anime. And that was how that story came out. Because, I said at the beginning, I didn't really talk about it much with anyone. And that came out with him because, he was talking about anime. And he's like, oh my God, Fly Me to the Moon. She loves that. So that was that particular message that you referenced. But yeah, the reason I stepped away... it's something I've thought about. I've not talked about it before, other than really on my study course. So, beginning of last year, I was doing a study course because I'm interested in psychology, and there's a group of 20 people who were absolutely amazing. I don't think I've been in a group of such kind, wonderful people. When you have a group of 20 people, it's not always like that, is it? And they were amazing, and I felt very lucky to be there. And for the first time, I spoke about the loss that I'd had, and I think that was part of actually the journey to starting to write music again, to be able to set that free and speak about it for the first time, really, at that point. And it's something that I haven't really spoken about, over the years, other than in therapy. And I'd lost my in '98, my girlfriend, I lost my girlfriend in a cycling accident, and I think, grief is incredibly complex, loss is incredibly complex, and it's the hardest thing that we have to bear in our lives, really, isn't it? And I think it took me a long time to, I think in many ways I got on with my life, and in many ways everything has been sort of, moving forwards, but the music was something that just was, I didn't have the heart for it. I just didn't have the passion and the heart to sing.
It became difficult.
Yeah, I think I think when when I sing, the music, writing music and the lyrics is different expression. It's creative, but when I sing, I'm channeling so much. I'm trying. Well, trying is the wrong word. It's almost like I'm trying to remove myself and expressing the emotion, and I think that's what people feel in "Fly Me to the Moon." They feel it. There's a feeling in that song that resonates with them. So if you're gonna sing with your heart, it's quite hard if your heart's not quite in that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It's sometimes these feelings can bleed into other areas of your life, and sometimes those other areas can be your passions.
Mm-hmm.
And it can take a long time to process some of those things. They're very complicated emotions, but we are here partially because that time has passed, and some of these things have been dealt with, and you're aspiring to music again, which is great. And why don't you go ahead and tell us about the new album and the song itself?
Yeah. I mean that part of my life is as well, to finish on that, is every experience that we have, whether that's joyful or painful, it becomes part of who we are, doesn't it? And what happened, that whole experience, the depth of empathy that I try to have with other people, that's shaped a lot of how I am now and what's important to me in my life. And the music and the songs now, so Love Will Set You Free. Did you want to play a clip?
Let's take a moment and we'll play a clip from the new song here.
So last September, I actually bought I bought some software, and I thought I had this urge to start doing some music again, and I'd bought some software, and then I bought a Machine Micro, and I'd sat down with that, and I remember it was the 2nd August bank holiday, so just as we were going into September, and I sat down and I started playing with some chords and some grooves. Within a few days, I had a few songs, and I was like, "Wow, this is coming. These songs are flying out. They're prolific." So, "Love Will Set You Free" was one of the early ones, and the way that the way that we work is, I mentioned I'm writing with Darren. So, what I do is I'll sit down and I'll work out some. Normally, I put down a groove and some chords, and I'll find a verse, a couple of verses, chorus, maybe a pre-chorus, and so the bulk of the song is there. And then, we'll work on maybe changing the structure up. There's so with "Love Will Set You Free," actually, Darren wrote the pre-choruses on this, and then he was like, "How about let's add a middle in?" And so we've really gone backwards and forwards with it. And he's in Australia. The way we work is we've set up Drive, like Google Drive, and we work iteratively, the same way I would work in design, actually. So iteration 1, version 1.1, version 1.2, and on and on. And we go backwards and forwards, adding another piece here, and what about this? How do you feel about that? And quite quickly, we're sort of working through the songs. So there's 3 that we're releasing soon. The first is Love Will Set You Free. And I've touched on that earlier. It's about, so many times I ask myself, what's the meaning of it all? It seems we're not meant to know. We live, we learn, we grow. That's the first verse, and it's about that sort of journey to find meaning in your life, and love will set you free. So finding yourself in the same way Shinji gets to the point where he says, I am who I am, I'm me. Actually you are who you are, and that's a myriad of things, and we're all a mix of good and bad things, and accepting the whole of ourselves is like the journey to setting yourself free. And that's what the song's about. So that's the first one. And then the second one is called, I think the Eva fans will like the second one as well, which is called Fly Away. And the third one is Not in the Words. But I've written over 30 songs now since last September, and they're all in pretty good shape. So it's a case of, we're both working day jobs. We're both kind of, doing things part-time, really. I'm going to be starting a job that is 3 or 4 days a week, so I can devote more time properly to music. So I'm really, switching my life up to accommodate that. And I think the plan is to, we're putting the first few songs out under my name, but potentially we're both open to, just making music, maybe writing for other people, and just seeing what happens. You never know. Let's see where it goes. Let's see if people like the songs. That's the whole point. I'm trying to write songs that I think there's a message that's obviously it's very personal for me, but I hope that other people will, they'll be meaningful for them. All of the messages that I get are around, it helps me to relax, it makes me feel good, it helps me to cry, it makes me happy. And I think these songs will do the same thing as Fly Me to the Moon in the essence of the feelings within them. I hope so.
So as far as the song goes, having listened to it and having listened to the full version, it struck me as, as you said, very very reminiscent to Fly Me to the Moon. One of my thoughts was that it almost sounded like, aside from like the more modern production value, it sounded like it could be like an unreleased song, from the soundtrack or one of the soundtracks. And I actually think it would, pair well with, the visuals from these newer movies that they've been, producing over the last, however many years it's been, 15, 16. And I think we kind of touched on this already, but, that reminiscence to Fly the Moon is very much, deliberate on your part.
Yeah, I did that because I sort of feel like it's hard to... How can I give something back? How do you do that with people you don't know? Okay, you've touched their lives with this particular song, which is incredible. What more could you want, really, as a creative, as a singer, to do that? And how can you give something back to say thank you? And I don't know how to do that, really. And I guess this. For me, being here today talking to you is one thing, and a little a reference in the new music to people that would get that, which the Eva fans will. Well, they will now because they've heard me talk about it as well. So, it just felt like a nice way of sort of being able to include that, and that was the idea with that.
It's a nice little nod to the history that you have as not only with this but also your own personal history and kind of the journey that you've gone through.
Yeah, I guess the other thing as well is, I'm an unknown artist with 10 million streams on one video.
Of crazy.
Yeah, there's the video on my YouTube channel. It's not my video, but I put it on there, and it's got over 10 million streams. So for me to have potentially an audience as an unknown is incredible, and I'm so grateful for that, because I know that these guys, they're always going to compare the new stuff to Fly Me to the Moon. Some are going to love it, some are going to say, oh, it's not like Fly. There's going to be a mix of feedback, I imagine, but to have people that want to hear you because of a previous song from so long ago is so incredibly rare. I'm very honoured. I'm very honoured, and you probably get a sense enough of me from the time we've been talking today that I don't take things for granted, basically. And yeah, I feel very honoured and privileged to actually be in the position that I am in at the moment. It's not like the first song is out and it's going crazy or anything, but just to know that there are people that want to hear it is amazing for me.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like you have for what it is, like this to be connected to something of this magnitude, but to have a very healthy perspective is good. So Levels Set You Free is coming out on August 6th. What is the timeline on the other couple songs?
So Fly Away, I think we were actually talking about trying to do that 3-4 weeks later, because it's pretty much ready to go. And then the other one probably about the same. But the thing that I really want to do, because obviously there's at the moment all of the marketing and the design stuff I've been doing, so all the little promos and things, and it's taken me away from the music. And also I'm starting a new job, real life stuff, yep. Everyday stuff. So
it's that life thing that gets in the way of everything.
Yeah, and it's there's no point in creating these songs if no one knows that they're there. So this stuff has to be done. But I'm desperate to get down and do some more writing and do some more music. I think I'm very much the whole extrovert thing and getting out there and putting myself out there I can do. But I actually, after this, will be quite happy to turn off the webcam, have my solitude. I quite like, I can be very much like that. I can disappear or, spend time on my own, and I enjoy that. So all of this stuff is a little bit alien, and it's not something I've done. This is the first podcast I've done, so, it's all new.
Yeah, I'm about to say, I looked. I think the only interview I could find with you was when the Telegraph interviewed you, a
climbing.
Quote about climbing.
Yes. Oh wow, that's amazing. Yeah, they did.
This is like I was like when I approached you, I was like, I do not think that this lady has been interviewed by anybody ever in any way related to any of this.
No, I haven't. And can I just...
Which is kind of... It's like... In a way, it's not that crazy, but it's like, that's kind of crazy.
I kind of, in a way, not consciously, but I would kind of looking at the situation myself now from the outside in, I guess I've kind of hidden myself away in that sense. And can I just say as well, for the guys that are listening, everyone listening, that climbing's been... I have to mention my trainer. I've not trained with him for ages now. It's been, after the pandemic. But Louis Parkinson, Captain Cutloose is his Insta. And climbing's been so pivotal for me. So anyone that is struggling with, just life, climbing is so good for that. Other than going and having some therapy, which is amazing as well. The two things together, I think, But climbing, there's something about it so empowering. It's an inner strength. It's a that sort of overcoming fears on the climbing wall. and then you take that out into the world and you overcome your fears there as well. And it's helped me. I don't think I'd be sitting here now doing music again if I hadn't started climbing maybe 4 years ago. So this is what I was saying to you earlier, all of these things combined. So yeah, I just really wanted to say that because, you know, with the Evangelion, with the story, you know, the psychological struggles, the fans, the messages that I get, you know, around how the songs help them when they've been down or, you know, having a hard time. That's something that I would say if you ever get the chance to do that, it's my only regret with climbing is I wish I'd started it, you know, 20 years ago. So yeah, just wanted to mention that.
So a couple quick questions about music. What artists do you draw inspiration from in your own music?
Gosh, do you know what I guess in terms of influences, I you know, I guess a lot of the old kind of Motown, soul, lots of kind of, I love female vocalists, you know, those old soul vocalists, and I guess influences, some of my old kind of favourites were artists like Sade, actually. I really loved all of her stuff, and she disappeared, didn't she? Completely. I don't, you know, no one knows what happened to Sade. She just kind of had a bunch of albums and disappeared. And you know, the Shaka Khans and the, oh gosh, I'm trying to think of names now, and there's a million of them. Oh my God, you've really put me on the spot, Aaron, because my mind goes blank with names. I can sing you the songs. And I remember the lyrics, but I forget names. I'm terrible with names. It's really bad. Yeah, there's
sometimes those one hit wonders that, like, that one song is like, oh, I remember that song, but it's like, who actually, who was it that sung that song?
Oh my God, you know what? It's like lots of like, you know, going back to the Motown artists like Dionne Warwick and Diana Ross, and I'm just, do you know what? I'm trying to think now. Oh, I guess people like Barbara Streisand, Whitney Houston, Anita Baker. I'm on a roll now. You know, all of those kind of classic female artists, very, very soulful, lots of feeling. And then there were the you know, Alex O'Neill, George Benson, I guess more contemporary artists like Snow Allegra, Anita Barras. Yeah, I actually at the moment I've hardly been listening to sort of new music. I don't listen to a lot of new music. I guess I don't want to be influenced by particular sounds or production types, or it's almost like, let's stay with the feeling, stay with what's true for you. Don't try to be or do something that isn't what you feel. I mean, that's a life strategy, right? Not just a song. And if it's true, and if you feel it, if I feel it, then other people will. That's how I sort of am approaching the whole music thing.
Finding your own voice as opposed to mimicking or channeling somebody else.
Yeah, I think I've always had my own voice. I don't think I've ever. I don't. You know, I've not ever tried to sing like anyone, and you know, comparisons have been made to you know, Sade, Misha Paris, various different. You know, everyone tries. People like to try and put a label on you, don't they? And you know, in all spheres of life. And though there've been a few different artists like that, but in terms of the writing, you know, those old soul kind of, that classic soul, funk groove, new soul style is a big influence on me. And the you know, the really songs that Dionne Warwick sang, you know, the more modern soul singers do a lot of vocal acrobatics, where the old, you know, the Motown style, the melodies, you know, those guys could sing, you know, a lot of them were from a gospel background, weren't they? But, you know, they could really sing, but the melodies were really strong. You know, if you see me walking down the street. There's no sort of vocal acrobatics going on. It's pretty straight. Walk on by, da, da, ba, da, ba. You know, it's this really strong melody. So I think those things have influenced me. I try to find, when I'm writing, really strong melody, vocal line, and something that people can sing along to, along with the feeling and the meaning. It's not something that I sort of think, oh, let me try and do da 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 da. But it's kind of happens like that, and then I guess now we're talking about it, I'm thinking, well, yeah, that the different artists and the influences probably come through in that way.
What's one thing you'd like for people to take away from your music?
I would like them to... I'd like them to feel... I want them to feel happy, sad, inspired, to cry to laugh to make love to whatever they feel. It's about the feeling. It's always about the feeling, and if that connects with people, then it gives my life meaning. Yeah, I don't think there's any more like I could ask of my music than that, to touch other people and for them to feel however they want to feel about it.
Very good. So since a significant component of the original Evangelion series is mental health, I noticed that during 2020, you spent a good bit of time as a mental health counselor. Can you tell us about that experience, or just generally your thoughts about the importance of mental health and wellness?
Yeah, sure. So I touched on earlier that I've always been interested in psychology, and I read a lot of that stuff for fun. And so I kind of was thinking about doing a part-time course, and it was it was a foundation course in psychotherapy and counselling. I mentioned the group as well earlier, the 20 people in our group who are wonderful, and so I thought actually it'd be really interesting to do that. It's one weekend a month, it's over the course of a year. Actually, I can only learn from this. I really enjoy learning stuff. That's something I always, in any area, I do enjoy learning. So I signed up for the course, and then, of course, we had 2 weekends, January and February last year, and the next thing we were in lockdown. So the rest of the year, the weekends were on Zoom. It was brilliant actually, because it kind of, I'd had a contract lined up, so I'd just finished a job, had a contract lined up, lost a job, and then those weekends it was almost like, oh good, it was sort of punctuating the endless weeks. So I'd picked up some work, and that was part-time, but yeah, I was juggling stuff. But basically the course was part of the course. If you wanted to continue further study, you needed to accrue a certain amount of clinical hours to take the next step, which involved being on a placement. And so I'd looked into, a placement that would be closer to home, so that after work, if I was going to do the counselling, I wasn't coming home at 10 o'clock at night. And that was very local to where I live in Walthamstow, and it's an LGBT service, and I'd signed up with them, and I'd started working with clients as a trainee, and it was incredible. It's one of the hardest things I've ever done, I think, emotionally, and so different from anything else I've done in terms of the job. You're lost at sea because you don't have a reference point that's familiar. So design, if I'm starting a new job in design, I know that, and I know, I might need to learn a new business or a new system, but I know design. Whereas with this, everything was completely new, and you're in that room with a client, a person who's, suffering, and you have that responsibility. And yeah, it's. I think that's actually quite an honour. The work that you do with, with your client it's quite a privilege, because they allow you into their world, and the relationship that's formed is actually the thing that's one of the things that becomes pivotal in them moving forwards in their lives. So super interesting, and actually again something else that I think was part of one of the things that was a shift towards me doing music again. I learned as much from my clients and working with them in that environment as I hope I help them. And I've kind of said that, before, actually I felt as if it was helping me as much as I was helping them.
Yeah, and in the past year and a half, really any form of counseling or support has certainly been enormously important in people's lives.
Yeah, for sure. I think what we saw really was, in a lot of ways, one of the big psychological defense mechanisms is busyness. People keep themselves incredibly busy because they don't have time to address things that they don't necessarily want to look at, and they don't want to take the lid off of, or and quite often people go to therapy or seek help when they're in a place that's desperate. There's no other choice. I may as well, because it can't be worse than this. That's the feeling. That's the sort of sentiment.
In terms of busyness and depression, it certainly is a double-edged sword, because it can be enormously helpful in taking you out of it, but also you also don't really deal with it.
All it does is delay the inevitable, doesn't it? It catches up with you at some point. You just sort of it's kind of going into denial about things, and busyness, and it's we all do it in different ways, I guess, at different times. But I guess the what happened in the pandemic was two things. Some people really suffered because they didn't have their busyness. So then they went, oh my God, I can't not see this thing now. I have to deal with it. It's right in front of me. And then other people had sort of time and space that, if they weren't running from something, it allowed other things to come into their lives that they'd, not had time for in a positive way. So, different people had different experiences, didn't they? But yeah, the service was very, very busy. I think a lot of people struggle with loneliness and being on their own. The isolation in the pandemic, the lack of, social interaction was hard for a lot of people. And then others, thrived in that. So, enjoyed the quietness, enjoyed the downtime, enjoyed not having to interact socially all the time. And, we're so different, aren't we, as human beings?
Speaking of, busyness and downtime, aside from climbing and designing and music, which is a lot to have on your plate, what else do you like to do, to spend your time?
Gosh, do you know what? It feels as if we've kind of not had any of those social things, have we, for so long now?
No.
And I really love movies. I mean, that's sort of one of the things I really enjoy. Gaming as well is another thing. And I don't do that, sort of the odd game here and there that I'll buy. I did play The Last of Us 2. That came out in the pandemic, didn't it? Which was brilliant.
Yeah. this is a tangent aside, but for my part, two of the games that I spent a good bit of time during the pandemic, adventuring, that were on completely different sides of the coin, were Horizon Zero Dawn and Last of Us 2.
Yeah, do you know what? I did play Horizon, and I enjoyed it at first, and then it becomes very repetitive. I mean, I know a lot of games do, but it sort of got quite repetitive, and I got a bit bored with it and didn't finish it. But God of War, I did finish that. That was excellent, actually.
Yeah, I spent a lot more time on that game than Last of Us 2, and
did you?
Last of Us 2 was it was also a fairly long game, but it was more, it felt more structured and more like
linear.
Things moved at a better clip.
It's a bit more linear, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And I think God of War's kind of a bit more exploratory. You've got the linear story, but you can go off into sort of subplots and explore, right? But yeah, I mean, I enjoy that, and like the social aspects that sort of I haven't every spare minute for months now. I've been out for dinner a few times. I enjoy doing that. I'd love to go out dancing. But that's not going to happen anytime soon. I don't. Well, who knows? Let's hope it is soon. But yeah, every spare minute I've kind of got this, music's back in my life, and I love coming into my study, and I'll sit down and I'm like, right, let's do a tune, put my headphones on, and I'm in my own little world, and I love it. The sense of achievement and wow, I've just created something new. It's that feeling of newness. That when you've been doing something for a very long time, you can lose that because it becomes mundane, and it feels so fresh and vibrant and colourful for me. Still,
it feels good to reopen that chapter in your life.
Yeah, it's been incredible. I've actually been happier. I've said this a few times. I've been happier in the since I've been doing music again. There's moments. There's times in my life I've been happy. I'm happy when you started a new relationship. You're overjoyed, aren't you? You're buzzing and you're flying down the street. But I'm talking about like. Self-directed, yes, fulfillment. Wow, I feel really, really aligned with myself, and this is me. This is just me making me feel good when I'm sitting at my desk and I'm writing some music or doing some singing. That's my sort of self-generated feel good feeling. It's not coming from anyone else. It's not out of, I guess we're touching again on some of the themes in Eva, being Shinji's kind of journey with trying to please and all of those things that happen. So actually you're doing something, and all you're doing is making yourself happy in that moment because it feels good to you, and but with a purpose of, wow, this is kind of, I really hope other people are going to love this as well. So that's always the ultimate. But at that moment when I'm at my desk with my headphones on, it's just me, and I love it. It makes me so happy. It's the little things, isn't it, in life that kind of, the big things, the really big, huge things that are momentary and pass. It's normally the small things that give us that sort of real joy, that lasting joy.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else you'd like to say as we wrap up?
Just thank you again for the to all of the Eva fans for the consistent good vibes and good energy and support that I've had consistently. It's I've said it earlier, but it's been amazing and completely appreciated. I really do feel that.
And how can people best keep up to date with you?
So I guess at the moment there's so my website has my social links on it, so that's clairelittley.com, and then I'm on Instagram, and there's a Facebook page that I created quite recently. Just Google Claire Littley and it should come up.
and I will be sure to include all of those with the description along with this podcast.
Oh, thank you.
So,
Thank
Claire,
you.
thank you so much for taking the time to tell us about this weird intersection between this one thing and your life and everything that's kind of come from it. And we all wish you all the success in your music in the future.
Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed talking with you. I know I've talked mostly, but it's been great. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks once again to Claire for taking the time to discuss her experience providing vocals for Fly Me to the Moon. Links to her various social media can be found in the description down below. If you enjoyed this show, be sure to subscribe for future episodes. Please leave us a comment or a like. It helps us a ton and lets us know how we're doing. More information, episodes, and show notes are available at avamonkey.com/podcast and at anchor.fm/avamonkey. Thanks for listening. We'll see you again soon.